Welcome to Patty's Place, a place where we'll talk about grief, dementia, and caregiving. My name is Lisa. I started this podcast in honor of my mom, who passed away from dementia about 2 years ago. So I just wanted people to know that you're not alone here. So grab your cup of tea, your cup of coffee, or if you're having a really bad day, maybe a glass of wine. And today we're going to talk to Christa McDonald. She is a hospice nurse for over 20 years. She has her own website as well. She also has a book out and a foundation. It's called GLAD, Grieving Loss After Death and Dying, for that. So welcome, Christa. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Patty, for having me.
Yes.
Glad to be here.
Yes. So I was looking at your website and everything. It's really cool for it. So you mentioned that, can you expand or explain what you mean by the end of the life is often life's greatest teacher?
Oh yeah, for sure. There's
Yeah.
so many things you could say about that.
Yeah.
I think it wasn't till I had my own personal experience that it became my greatest teacher. And, when we're younger, I'm 45 now, but, I started doing this. My mom took me to the hospital when I was a young age at 13, but I was a CNA at 16. So at 16 is when it started. And when I was younger, I helped all three of my grandparents when I was younger, before the age of 20. And I was always told to get over it.
Mm-hmm.
And we really didn't know how to deal with it. Right. Until about a year ago, a little less than a year ago, when I had my own personal experience with my stepdad, is when it hits you when you have that personal experience, and it changes everything, especially if you really love the person.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I always say everything. I had a lot of visions and dreams for over 10 years to help people with grief, because I always say, once the funeral ends, where do people go? Nobody knows where to go. And
Right.
we live in a grief avoidant society. And, I have been in since a young age in my 20s, when I started working for the visiting nurse service in New York. I've been in thousands of homes, and I've just seen so many people not know how to grieve, and just sit there and like just stay in this container for the rest of their life, just grieving over this loss, because they just don't know where to go. They don't know how to grieve properly. So this mission came out of my own personal experience. So, when you lose somebody physically that you love, it changes you. And I always tell people that GLAD came about because of MAD and SAD in New York. I grew up with Mothers Against Drunk Driving, Students Against Drunk Driving. And that came about because a mother had an experience that lost her son, right? And she wanted to change the world too. So sometimes when things are so that it becomes painful and it hurts, when in doubt, focus out. And that's what I tell people. So take your pain and put it to purpose, because the world needs you.
That's very true. Yeah, very, very true. I mean, me personally, I've had other deaths and, for family related, but with my mom, yeah, it's just different, totally different. Cause obviously she was the closest person I had with it. And, being a hospice nurse, obviously you've seen a lot of things. And one thing that I'm grateful for is that I was with her, especially I was with her every day, but especially that last week, I spent the nights with her because she was in memory care with it. Can you talk a little bit too about they always say hearing is one of the last senses to go. Is that true?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And there's so many studies, but I've read studies that, that people still hear and know what's going on for 20 minutes after they passed. So no. And yeah, I always tell people they could hear you. Just say whatever you need to say what you want. I love, with your mother, those are not easy situations, because a lot of people treat dementia. It always bothered me my whole nursing career, because they treat people with dementia and Alzheimer's like they're not there.
Mm-hmm.
And they're completely there. They understand everything. I've seen, they
Right.
understand if you just communicate to them, even if they're not, on their deathbed. It doesn't have to be just, with the dementia and Alzheimer's. If you just explain to people, explain to the, patients, they're treated a little bit differently, and it's not the easiest thing. And I've always been an advocate. I'm like, they hear you, they know you, they see you. And they're special people, but they could hear everything and they understand. But yeah, when people are dying, it's why I tell them, I said, whatever you need to say, let it out. They're going to hear you, and people respond. I mean, people, even if they're in a comatose position, in that position in the last 24 hours, where people think they can't hear, they hear everything. And sometimes it's that wink of an eye you get, or all of a sudden a jolt if you say something, for them to they acknowledge you when, they let you know, I hear you. for sure.
Cause I was there I spent the evenings with my mom. Cause I just did not want her to die alone. That was just really important to me. So my dad was there during the day and I was there at night, but I like played music for her. Um, I would play that and I talked to her and stuff like that. She was the first night she was still talkative a little bit, but then after that one, a little bit here and there. But as the days went on, that last week she didn't. But so I played all her favorite music and I talked to her and stuff. And like I even said to her, please come visit me. Don't haunt me, but just come to visit me. I mean, like, and I told her I'd take care of my dad. Like. And that it was okay and that kind of stuff. The other thing too is I've heard a lot of times that when someone passes, they don't always like to be right there with that person. Like people ask me what time exactly did my mom pass because I was there. And I don't
Yeah.
know the exact time because I knew it was coming because the hospice nurse had said it would be about a week and it was coming towards the end of the week. And I could tell her breathing was starting to change, and
Yeah.
I woke up and she was still breathing, but it was kind of like the death rattle, they call it, right? And
Yeah.
so she was still a little bit, and then I closed my eyes again, and a little bit later, I opened my eyes up, and I didn't hear anything, and I went to check on her, and then I had to go get the nurse that was on duty because she was in memory care and all that. So I almost feel like my mom, I think, purposely actually passed when she knew I was asleep. Like she knew I was there, but she didn't maybe necessarily want me to hear her last breath. I don't know.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on those types of things? Because I've heard different things.
I know I have chills listening to it, because I love that. No, and how because she wants you to remember her alive.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people like hold on to that last breath, and I feel like she was just like she did it her way. She's like,
Yes.
I'm out of here. Just remember me. I almost feel like your mom has like, I don't know, like she was just like my grandmother, almost like a saint in this world, like a good woman.
Yes, she was.
Just like she's just such a good, solid woman that she just did, and she didn't want to disturb anybody.
Yes,
Like let
that
me
was
just
her.
whisper to this. I don't
Yeah.
want any,
Yeah.
because people really, and then they have regret. And I'm like, you have to take her experience. It's beautiful. It's like birth. We don't know if we're going to come in for a C-section or we don't
Right.
know all these things, but
Right.
that's a beautiful story. And that's my message to the world, because how you live is how you die, I tell people. So like, I think it's just beautiful because if you're not there to see that last breath, they just are saying, I did it my way. I left peacefully, and just remember me alive and take all those memories and live with them. And people are like, I should have woke up. I should have. No, you shouldn't have. When people, it was how it was supposed to be. And I love that story. I just get chills because they're not always like that, Patty.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just they're that sounds exactly like Mary at 16, my first passing that I was with. And I was in school with CNA. I was washing her, and she was on her side, and the teacher walked in and was like, Mary's dead. And I'm like, and she just passed away, like as I was washing her.
Yeah.
And I didn't know. I had no idea. And and when you hear stories like that, I always tell people that those women too had strong faith. I'm sure your mom has
Yeah.
some strong faith.
Yeah, she did. And
Yeah.
she also, I know a lot of times people say it too as they get closer to death, that they start to see people. My mom had it for quite a while, I guess some people would get scared. I didn't. It was almost more like out of curiosity. Like she said she saw her one cousin because when she was 11, her one cousin died tragically, and they were like sisters more than cousins. So she said, "Don't you see this little girl with red hair?" And I was like, "Oh, what's her name?" And then she told me her name, and I was like, "Oh, okay." And then she started seeing her brother who had passed, and we had never told her that her brother passed because why do it? She had dementia. It would just upset her. And she was asking for her mom and things like that. And I almost felt like comforted because I believed they were there. Even though I didn't see them, I believed they were there. And then she also looked like she was petting a dog, and we had dogs that had passed too. So I kind of believed they were there with her too. Bringing her comfort.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I'm telling you, I have chills throughout my body. And this has been, I always tell people, I'm like, I'm Christa, I'm Christ with an I. I said, I never, it's hard to put like a religion in it. It's not spiritual, it's not religious. Sometimes it's just what it is. But a lot of people that pray to a God in Jesus that we can't see, I've heard thousands of stories like this. And that's
Hmm.
why, that's why I wrote the book too, because from a young age in my early 20s, there was a woman that was like, the doorbell rings every night at 8 p.m. That's my husband who passed. And I'm like, and I heard thousands of stories like this.
Mhm.
So if your mom is still alive talking to somebody on the other side that died tragically, I always tell people, like, I don't believe that we die. I think that just like we have that connection with God and Jesus, we have that same connection. And I always, when I had the opportunity to help people at the end of life, exactly what my stepdad, I said, how am I going to know it's you when you pass? How am I going to know? And he was a feisty guy. And he said, I'm going to be bird poop on your windshield. I said, all right, bird poop on my windshield. Why couldn't you be a blue jay or something?
Right, right.
And do you know, the day after he passed, I wasn't ready to see it. There was bird poop. I had to go in the car to do something for him, and there's bird poop all over. And I lost it. I wasn't ready. Now, it took me about a good 7 months to actually build that connection and to see him and to hear him. He was a UPS driver, so I see UPS trucks all over.
Mhm.
That you just get different signs. So your loved ones are there, and that's that point right there. At the end of life, your story, thousands of people say it. Oh, my mom saw my loved one, saw this one, saw that one. And it's like, because they're there, because we're all here. We just can't see them. And that's why I tell people, when somebody dies, grief takes a minimum, I believe, of a year. So, and it's funny, as we're talking, a UPS truck is going past right now. I can't even, I wish I could show you. And, I said, but, it takes a year for people to, that physical loss is not easy to not have your mom, to just call her and hug her, and even me. And, the last week I had a breakdown in Costco. And, and I said, this program, the GLAD program, which I'll tell you about, but it's up and running in June. But I'm like, it's a 24/7 bereavement, that if you have a breakdown, you just call, and grief coaches will get you through bereavement. Because grief it's affecting people's health. It became an ICD-9 code, and people don't know how to create that relationship to say, all right, I know that you're not physically here, but, I know that I could still talk to you.
Yes.
I know that I get messages through the birds, the trees, the numbers, their signs,
Right.
And that's where people need to start looking at death and grief, because it's the only thing guaranteed. Nobody is guaranteed tomorrow, not one person. And that's the truth. But I love that with your mom, because all of it's true, all of it's real. And I don't know, right? But I've had thousands of testimonials, because I've been blessed to have this gift of helping people, during this journey. It's the hardest thing to do, but it's beautiful if you make it. Because
Yes.
look at you, Patty. Look what you did. You're changing the world. You took your pain and you made it your purpose. Because do you know how many people out there miss their mother? They don't know how to function without their mother.
Yes.
I lost, my stepdad, but I still do have my mother. But I think about that. I'm like, wow, who would I call? And so people need what you're doing, Patty. So thank you for what you're doing.
You mentioned your book. So it's 8 lessons that dying taught me. So you want to talk, and you also say it's a soul worker. I love that title with it. What do you mean by the soul worker?
Yeah, I just always tell people, I think that we're on a soul journey, and so many people, like I said, how we live is how we die. And a lot of people don't want to talk about death and realize, like, you might not be here tomorrow. And how you live is how you die. And this world, we need a little bit more love. And we all know that, right?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people live their life worried about two things and money, which you don't take with you when you're not in this world.
True.
You leave a legacy. And that's what I tell people. Like, you leave a legacy. When you pass, do you want people to just say, oh, I joke with this, that you were an Amazon, a Costco member? Or do you want to say, you made Patty's Place, right? Patty Place left a legacy. Like, so it's like, we have to realize that we have this one life. Who do you want to be, and who do you want to show up to be? So the biggest lesson it's 8 lessons dying has taught me. I wanted to write this book for over 10 years. I'm actually working on my second one. And the title of that is, Hey Kid, I'm Still Here. So it's to help people develop that relationship, to realize that relationship. But the one big lesson that I really like to tell the world is presence, like you gave your mother. And people, like, in those days, it's the hardest. And that emotionally on you just felt like, what is happening to me? So what you did is you showed up and you were present. And that's what a lot of people don't do. They run from it. I'm scared of death. I can't watch this. I can't watch that. We're all going to die. So when you're dying, do you want somebody to show up? If you know that somebody's sick, like your neighbor, right? Do you want to just ask them, you need bread, you need water, you need something? Sometimes we got to get back down to the basic stuff. So I don't know if it's this social media that's ruined us, but you showed up, Patty. And you're the reason I wrote the book, because you're rare. People don't always show up, even if it's the mother or the father. And that's the truth.
Yeah.
That's the truth.
And that's something that my mom taught me, because my mom showed up for other people. That she was a caregiver, and so she showed up for many different people. She had a lot of tragedies in her life, a lot of people that passed, and she always showed up. As a matter of fact, her one of her very best friends, at the end, it was hard for her to see her, and she drove around in the memory care facility like a half hour before she could come up, and she kept thinking to herself, well, what would my mom done? And she forced herself to come up and see her, because she knew she would, if the roles were reversed. And so, and especially with dementia, there isn't anything you can do. So all I could do was be there for her. And it took me a while to learn that I just had to enter her world, and, don't be correcting her or whatever. And sometimes it was funny, because especially in that facility, in the facility, when you hear two dementia patients talk, sometimes it was hard not to laugh because
Oh
some of the
yeah.
stories, and you just have to go along with it. But I always felt bad for the residents that never had any visitors.
Yeah.
I just did, because it was more about the family or the people, in my opinion, that it was too hard for them to see him that way. But they didn't know that. My mom thought she was at her grandma's house. That's where she thought she
Yeah.
was at. So I went along with it. I didn't try to correct her, you know.
Yeah.
And I think
Yeah.
people with dementia do teach you that you have to live in the moment, because that's all they have
Yeah.
is that
Yeah.
moment
And
with
they
it.
feel the love, no matter if wherever she thinks she knew that you were there and
Hmm.
loving her, and that your light is shining, and she just felt loved and happy. They know.
Yeah, because like she didn't know who I was or who my dad were, but we both felt like deep down inside she knew we were people she could trust, and so she felt
Yes.
okay. Like she just thought I was this really nice girl that came to visit her, you know. So I went along with that, with it. Um, so I do think presence is important when people are sick and stuff, because it is hard to get into the dying person's frame of mind and be there for them and not talk about, because you have all those other feelings going on. I'm sure you have lots of stories about families with
Oh,
I'm sure. you
so
know,
many.
too
Yeah,
many.
so many. But
Yeah,
too
yeah.
many. But to be prepared, and that's true. The truth of it, because it's the only thing guaranteed. And there's a lot of family fights, and there's so much. I mean,
Hmm.
I've called the cops so many times. I could tell you so many stories, because people think that money and things they matter, and they don't. And then all this, and it's because sometimes we don't want to deal with death to talk about it, so we don't do anything, right? So we don't set up the beneficiaries, the DNRs. When you want to be cremated? And I try to tell people, like, if it's only, let's make it fun a little bit. Even when my stepdad was dying, when he had a Big Daddy shirt, he was a trip, but we
Hmm.
made it fun. We did,
Right.
throughout the whole journey. We definitely, you do what you can to make it fun. So
Yeah, I mean,
it's only
luckily,
fun.
like I said, I've told this story before. My mom, way before she even got sick, I came over to see her the one day, and because she's like, come here. And I'm like, what? And there she has all these CDs on her bed with little notes on them. And she's like, these are the songs I want played at my funeral. I'm like, Mom, she's like, you need to know this. And I was like, okay, you know. And so sure enough, I made sure I grabbed all those CDs with the little notes, and I followed him, I was like, okay, Mom.
And I say, when people can talk about it like that, when she's like, "Oh, when I die," is because your mom, one, she had strong faith, right? And I tell people, it's just about faith. She believed that we're not in control. A lot of people think we are. She had strong faith, and she knew where she was going, right? And that's how just peacefully that she just went. And that's that. I mean, I just love this story, because it's very rare that I get to say, "This is why I'm doing," right? Because your mom, she was a good human. She did for people, right? She's not
Hmm.
hurting any, and this is how it is. And she just, and there's no morphine. That's when people say morphine and meds kill, is because people's souls aren't right, right? That's where
Yeah,
the soul worker came from too. So
yeah.
you have a beautiful story.
Oh, well, thank you. And like I said, my mom, she had a lot of tragedy in her life, so she talked about it a lot with it, and I think that's what made her such a good caregiver. She always wanted to take care of people with it. So for me, I was like, well, I can't do anything. There's nothing to fix dementia, which that's a whole nother issue, so at least I could be there for her, with it, for it. And, just bring her stuff that she liked and let her talk and that kind of stuff. That was all I could do with it. Um, so on your website here, you mentioned earlier GLAD. Can you tell us what that stands for?
Yeah, so glad I had this vision like 10 years ago when a guy that lost his wife, after 6 months of losing her, he couldn't leave the house. He was shaking. And I just never knew the acronym until my stepdad passed. So it's Grieving Loss After Death and Dying. And it's the first national online bereavement program. So there's three parts to it. And the first one is the 24/7 toll free number. And this will be up and going June 17th. So
Okay.
that's the first part of it that anybody can just call if, it's kind of like the suicide hotline. The second one is the online classes. So right now we have 34 online classes that are all going to be online, via Zoom. We have different ones for if you lost a child, if you lost a parent, if you lost a spouse. And just we have different other, there'll be some things of like chair yoga, different modalities just for the nervous system. I think we have somebody coming on for sound bath. So it's just very generic to just help people. We have a man's group because men, there's no place for them to go. So that's the second part. And then the third part is we're helping 50 families a year with $8,000. So we want to help them make their dreams come true, at the end of life. And
Mm-hmm.
maybe it takes the pressure off of people to help them grieve differently, help them die, grieve differently at the end of life. So we're going to start off helping 50 families. So right now, that's what the program is. We're in the process of, getting donations, founder circles, things like that. And our first live event is April 14th in Sarasota, Florida, is
Okay.
our first event, live event. Yeah, to get Glad out there. And yeah, we're just really excited about it. Like, because I said, we live in a grief avoidant society. And after the funeral and casserole stop, people don't know where to go. And this people could do from their home on their own schedule. So yeah, we're super excited. And we have about 12 grief coaches now, like amazing grief coaches, a lot of them that wrote their own books, have groups already, have podcasts like you that are helping people.
I do agree with you. I think we do live in a grief avoidance society. People don't know what to say, so they just don't say it. And they think, oh, well, I remember right after my mom's service, somebody asked me, oh, how are you? And I was like, I feel like now is when it really starts because you're in that, the whole, you got to clean out the room. You got to do all this other stuff. You got to do the service. You got to get through all this. Got to buy the dress for the service. And now you're like, okay, it's over. Like it really hits. And that's when people kind of leave you. They don't mean
Yeah.
to, but
No.
and
No.
it's hard to find those people that you have that space with that you could talk. Like I ended up telling people like, I want you to talk about my mom. I feel comfort when I talk about my mom. I want to hear those
Yeah.
stories, like
Yeah.
because sometimes she said stuff that just really made you laugh, and like that brings me comfort. Not talking about her hurts, with it. But it is hard for people because they don't know what to say.
They don't know.
And
They don't know.
sometimes,
I got chills again. I love this.
it's like sometimes you just want people to just be there and you just need to vent or you just need to talk about stuff because then you have all this other stuff that happens afterwards. You got to deal with the banks and all that other stuff. It's like,
Exactly.
it's a lot. And I do think sometimes people are scared to ask for help or they don't know what's going on. They don't understand what grief is
Yeah.
with it. So
Yeah.
it's nice that
Yeah.
people will be able to come on to, and your website is ChristaMcDonald.com, correct?
It is. It is. It's in the process, but this even Glad community, we're in a little bit of they're just changing the websites. But yeah,
Okay.
it's ChristaMcDonald.com and GladCommunity.com.
Okay.
And yeah. Yeah, I love that too, though, what you said, Patty, because people have to talk about their loved one because we're focusing on the loss that we're not celebrating the life. And
Mm-hmm.
they bring so many gifts. Like I know that we had the loss, but we got to celebrate. We have to celebrate them and talk about it. And especially for the first couple of months, I tell people do something, right? Light a candle. Like there was a candle. I just if it went, it was a battery. If the batteries, I had to go get batteries, make it lit. It's just a way to honor them. So I love that you want to talk about them, and because a lot of people do, they avoid. Oh, they're not here. Why are we going to talk about them? And it's like they gave us so many beautiful gifts. How could we not talk about them?
Exactly. Yeah. And it does hurt sometimes, but then it also brings comfort with
Yeah,
that
yeah,
as well
yes.
for it. So what would you say you would want people to know? Because, sometimes people have the wrong impression about hospice. What would you tell them, because I had a wonderful experience with hospice. My mom had hospice. So what would you tell
Yeah.
them hospice gives you so much more than people think with it?
Yes. Yes. And I have done home health, in the
Mm-hmm.
beginning of my career because a lot of people didn't want to go on hospice. I tell people I think hospice is a beautiful thing. I think in healthcare, yes, there's shortages and there's different hospices that offer and can offer. So I do believe that it is a personal experience. That's why, with some hospices, I think that's why they have that. But I always tell people that if, especially old people, it's not for the last minute of when you're going to pass. I have had patients on it 1 year, 2 year, 3 years, even 4 years. I've had patients on hospice for 4 years. And what that means is that you have a condition that we can't treat, that's not getting better, right? That we just manage the symptoms, but you're not going to get better. And, you have to be certified every 6 months or so.
Mm-hmm.
But they just offer not only emotional support, physical support, and you don't feel alone. And every state, and I traveled America over 10 years as a hospice nurse. So I've gotten to see different, hospices. That's why I know some states have more than others. And that's why people have different experiences. But if you have a loved one that you just know that, and I always tell people, I'm going to say this for your caregivers, because I always tell, especially wives, right? I don't know, sometimes and I'm not saying it's not husbands, but a lot of times it's wives, that if you're getting older and you're starting to get really frustrated with your husband, a lot of times it can be lack of oxygen to the brain. Something else might be going on. And I've had this story hundreds and hundreds of times where wives are, and a lot of times when you get older, sometimes people just don't die. Sometimes people do die a year, 2 years, 3 years, right? The body
Mm-hmm.
takes time. But I always tell people, when people get on hospice, they live longer, right? Because hospice relooks at your medications. They take you off a lot of medications, because people don't realize the older you get, you do not metabolize the medications as if you were 40 or 50,
Mm-hmm.
right? So some of the meds become toxic. They take you off medications, which a lot of families don't like. That actually, I've seen people that had Alzheimer's and dementia speak Spanish again, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's sometimes medications that they look at it differently, because as as the body is shutting down, you get older, it's treated differently than if you're younger. So hospice gives you that support, because at any moment, that's what I tell people, you can have a change. And you have a magnet on every refrigerator, right, to call the hospice agency if something's wrong. And that's what I have for GLAD too. So every refrigerator in America will have a bereavement magnet too, because I have magnets made that will go out, so that hospices, if you are dying, that you have support all the time, right? And then GLAD is, once you have that loss, you got GLAD, and that we're going to support you. And we need a better system, going forward for that.
I
I
would.
get off on tangents here, Patty.
That's
Don't
okay.
get me started.
No, I would agree, because a lot of people do have a misconception about hospice. They think, oh, it's only for your deathbed, and um, hospice actually came in about 4 months before my mom passed, and at the point, my dad and I weren't even sure if she qualified or not. But the memory care facility was like, well, she needs a little bit more care, so we called hospice, and they were just absolutely wonderful. Like, and even
Yeah.
the hospice nurse even helped even explain dementia even more to me with it, and explained how my mom was very highly unusual for the degree her dementia was, but she was still mobile. And
Yeah.
so and then as soon as it was funny, because not really funny, but it's almost ironic, I guess. That part of the brain shut off for my mom while the hospice nurse was there, where she couldn't make the turns anymore in the bathroom, and she didn't know what to
Mm,
do. So she had to get in a wheelchair, and then they had to get
yeah.
the hospital bed and the power recliner and everything for her. Like, the hospice nurse, I could tell she was anticipating it was coming with it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I learned
Yeah.
so much and
Yeah.
what support in that. And I wish people would realize that those resources
Yeah.
are out there, and
Yeah,
they
because
help you.
change comes like that. You saw just to turn in the bathroom. And
Mm-hmm.
I've met, patients, and the next day they don't even know who I am.
Mm-hmm.
So families are like, it's scary that when you're on hospice, they're like, what does it look like? And I'm like, you call us anytime. That's why you have the magnet. You
Yes.
call us, we will be there. And
Yes.
you have that support. So yeah, I love it.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I can't speak highly enough of hospice, what they did. And now there's stories I've had too of other family members or close family friends that have had hospice with it for that.
Yeah.
So where can people purchase your book, The 8 Lessons of Dying?
It's going to be coming out. I'm
Okay.
getting the final. We had to do some, within the next 4 weeks on
Okay.
Amazon, they'll be able to get it. So it'll be on my website. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
People will. And, Patty, I just want to thank you for being such an amazing daughter.
Well, I had a good teacher with my mom.
I know, but, thank you. Because
Yeah.
this is what it should look like, right? We're just here to help each other. That's all.
Yeah.
Just go
That's
back to the love and, Parents, I always tell people that parents always do the best that they can, especially with children. I've seen them, our parents do the best that we can, just like us, right? Especially if we have kids. We know having kids are hard.
Yeah.
So sometimes we just have to realize that, like, we thank our parents, and then at a certain age, we take responsibility and love our parents. And that's what I love it. And that's what, more of us have to do in the world a little
Yeah.
bit.
It's not easy. It's hard. But I just,
Yeah.
I just, because she was such the caregiver. That's what she did. And I knew that if she took care of me, so I was like, I needed to take care of her with it. So we will definitely have your website on with our on our page with it, and people can purchase the book as well. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
So hopefully everybody has learned a lot today, and you've enjoyed your cup of tea or your cup of coffee, or if you're, like I said, you're having a really bad day, your glass of wine, and you will join us for another edition of Patty's Place.